Hi everybody. Here's our first week's video. We're going to set up our math journal. So I'm just using a spiral bound notebook that I actually had used for some other stuff, and I ripped out all those pages and this is what's left. But I like the cover. It just makes me happy, and I love math. Let me put the camera up on the stand, and you can watch over my shoulder as I build this. 1 second. Okay, so I have all my supplies here. I have a pencil and I have a ruler, just because I like to make sure that my lines are really straight. For this one, I'm going to need some glue, so I just have a little glue stick from the dollar store. I have a pair of scissors from my kitchen. And then I also have some colored pencils. You don't necessarily need those. But I just sometimes like to color things, especially with a cover that's this bright, right? I might have to color a little bit. Let me adjust this just a smidgen here. I should have done this before I turned you on, but oh, there it is right there. There we go. There you can kind of see everything better. Okay. So again, I've got all my materials. I have some notes over on my left. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to the first page. And at the beginning of every book, there is always a table of contents. So this is the place where you go to kind of look at where to find information. And I'm going to draw myself a column just kind of right like that. Maybe like maybe a couple of inches over into the page. And then because I have my ruler out and I'm having fun drawing lines, I might draw one up here as well. And so then I'm also going to number, because the other thing that a book needs is page numbers. So I'm going to make my table of contents 1, which means that this one here, let me move my stuff out of the way. This one here, this side will be 2, and this will be page 3. And then I have 4 and 5. I'm going to go to about 10, 6, and 7, 8, 9. Oh, maybe I'm going to go to 11, because then I come out even. Just to kind of get myself started on those page numbers. And then I'm going to come back over here because we're going to start with our first topic tonight, which is going to be, oop, my cats are running around. It's going to be a vocabulary review. So again, Unit 7, our first unit this quarter, is probably the one that you ended Math 56 with. So we're just sort of reviewing. And I want to make sure that we are all on the same page about what some of these words mean. And maybe this is something that you've never really talked about before. And so this will be good information for you to have. Oh, Benny and Sammy are coming to visit. We'll see how this goes. There's Sammy. Hi, buddy. Move. Okay. So for our vocabulary review, oh my gosh, seriously, cat? Come on. Oh, buddy. You can't lay right where I need to work. Welcome to life in quarantine at my house. It's a crazy place. Okay, so for our vocabulary review, we're actually going to use 2 pages. We'll use 2 pages for pretty much everything, because we do one thing on the left side of the page, and we do one thing on the right side of the page, and I kind of want to walk us through that. Buddy, hi, sweet boy. Come on. Get down. Okay, so I'm going to turn to page 2. And actually on the top of pages 2 and 3, I'm going to write vocabulary. I think I'm spelling that wrong. Vocabulary review. I'm going to write that on the top of each page. Now my pages, this is a big notebook. These are some big pages. Vocabulary review. And you don't have to use a book that's this big. I was just at the dollar store the other day and they had a bunch of like notebooks that were smaller than this. Something like that could work for you as well. So yeah. So our goal is going to be the first thing that we write over here. We're going to review some terms. Some words. We're going to review variable. What does variable mean? We're going to talk about equations versus expressions. And then we're just gonna the steps to solve an equation, because you know what? It may have been a couple of weeks since you've done that. Hopefully you can see that okay. So yeah, our goal is to review the terms, and maybe I'll say vocab terms, variable and equations versus expressions. And then we're going to walk through the steps to solve an equation. So that's our goal for these 2 pages. So then I'm going to take some COVID notes, because, you know, we are living through an interesting time. And I think that it's important to sort of maybe note a little bit how these times are affecting you as you hi, buddy. This is Sammy, the teaching assistant. How these times are affecting you as you're trying to learn math. So maybe jot down a couple of words. Today I'm feeling, this is for me. You're not going to write this. You're going to write down what you feel. Hi, buddy. How are you feeling today? Today I'm feeling a little stressed. And my cat apparently needs attention. Hi, buddy. And then take some notes about how, when I say variable, equations, expressions, and solving equations, like, how does that make you feel? What's your reaction? To the goal for today. So, you know, maybe I wrote down the question, but this is what I want you to ask yourself. Like, what's your reaction to these words? Do you feel confident? Do you feel like, gosh, I probably need some work. It's been a minute since I've looked at these things. So just sort of take some notes about that. And then I want you to give yourself a confidence score. So that's on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being 100%, I have got this. 1 being, like I maybe need some help. Give yourself a score on this line. Oh, Sammy, are you going to help us? Or are you going to make this hard? Okay. Ouch, don't bite me. Jeez. I'm going to take 1 second and remove the cat. Come here, buddy. Come on, get down. Thank you. So this is what's going to go on the left-hand side. And I'll add some notes so that you can remember all of this. It doesn't have to be elaborate. I just want you to sort of think about where you're at today and how you're feeling about the math, how you're feeling about the world in general. studies show that adults do better if they think about their learning and not just do the learning. So if you're thinking about what headspace you're in to do learning, you're actually going to learn it a lot better. Now we're going to head over to the other side. So this is going to be the right-hand side of my page. And I have another piece of paper right here that I tore out of another notebook. And I'm going to kind of go like this. I'm going to fold over from the edge to the pink line on the other side, and then I'm going to kind of cut the holes and stuff off. And so I've basically folded it in half the long way, and then I'm going to cut it, just the top layer, into like 3 different spots. And I actually think that this is not going to fit very well in my book. So I'm going to cut some off of the top. Cut some off the top because that's the one that there's less to say about what we'll say here. And we're going to talk about variables. We're going to talk about the difference between equations and expressions. I think I said equations versus expressions. We need some sports metaphors since there's no sports on TV. Baseball hasn't started. All my hockey games are canceled. It's very sad. And then we're going to review solving equations. And I like to do this because then I can isolate the information. I make this little flap and then I don't have to look at everything on a page. I can just look at only the information that I need. So a variable is a letter that represents an unknown number. And some examples. X is by far the most popular. N happens a lot. A, B, and C could be. My personal favorite is to use the letter H, but that's because my name starts with H. But I just wanted to sort of remember that that's what that variable is. When something says to solve for X, that X that's in there, it's standing in for some unknown number that we haven't figured out yet. And that's just I just feel like that's a really good starting place. So then I want to talk about equations versus expressions. And I actually said I'm going to put expressions over here. Here's my fold line. I'm going to put equations over here. So an expression is a math sentence with numbers and letters and operations. That's it. That's what an expression is. And so what's an example of an expression? Well, we might have y minus 20. That would be an expression. We might have 3 times 5 minus 6 times y. Something that looks like that. We might have 2y plus 3b. These are all expressions. They're just a math sentence. Maybe it'll make it less scary if you think about it as a sentence, because we all know how to read. Sometimes we don't feel that confident in math, though. And so let's look at what an equation is different than an expression. An equation, it's a statement of numbers, expressions, and operations that are equal. This is the big difference between an equation and an expression. Because an equation, if I have y minus 20, it's going to equal something. It's going to equal 50. If I have 3 times 5 minus 6 times y, that's going to equal, I don't know, what's a good number? 30? That'll equal 30. And then if I have this, 2y plus 3b, that would equal 12. I don't know. I'm making things up. But this is the key difference between equations and expressions. Equations have an equal sign. Expressions do not have an equal sign. And our language around them is different as well. Expressions, we can really only simplify. We simplify expressions. Equations, though, we can solve equations. Hi, buddy. Sammy, the teaching assistant, is back. So those are the two main differences. Expressions, no equal sign, and we can only simplify. Equations have an equal sign. They actually contain an expression. They could. And an equation we can solve for it. So let's talk about solving equations here. I gotta move my notes out from under the cat. Oh, Sammy. Come on. Thank you. All right. He just loves to be involved in everything. So for solving equations, I want to go in a certain order. And you've probably talked about this before, but when I'm solving equations, my goal is always to get the variable on one side of the equal sign all by itself and the numbers on the other side. So I'm looking for something that looks like that. That is always going to be my goal. X equals 3, for example. Not that 3 is always going to be my answer, but just I have a variable and it's going to equal something. All my variables are on one side of the equal sign and my number is on the right side. And we solve these in a certain order. So I'm first going to distribute. If there's anything that I have to distribute, and that's where I have something like this, right? And I'm going to distribute that 3 to everything inside of the parentheses. I'm going to do that first. And then I'm going to combine any like terms on the same side of the equal sign. Then I'm going to combine like terms across the equal sign. And I do that by finding the inverse operation. You might not have heard it said like this before exactly, but but that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to find the inverse operation. And really quick, let's review what that is. This is the opposite, right? The opposite of addition is subtraction. The opposite of subtraction is addition. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. The opposite of dividing is multiplying. And then I'm going to add or subtract. And then I'm going to multiply or divide. And that's basically how I solve that. I'm going to glue this into my book. I'm going to glue it kind of over to the right. Because I want to leave a little bit of room so that we can just have a little bit of an example to review this. Again, it might have been a couple of days since you've done this, so let's just sort of review. So here I've got a problem. So I have this big long thing, this big long equation, because it has the equal sign right there. 3 times the quantity of x minus 4 equals 2 times the quantity of negative 2x plus 1. So first, according to my list, I'm going to distribute. So I'm going to distribute that 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 4 is going to be negative 12. My equal sign is going to stay in the exact same place. 2 times a negative 2 is negative 4. The x comes along for the ride. 2 times 1 is going to be 2. And then I'm going to combine like terms on the same side of the equal sign, but I don't have anything to do with that, so that's okay. I can skip step number 2 because I don't have to do it. That's going to take me to step number 3, which is where I combine terms across that equal sign. So I have an x here and an x there. I have a number here without a variable, and I have a number here without a variable. So I like to start with this. I like to start by moving the smaller thing with the variable first. So if I have positive 3x and negative 4x, this is going to be my smaller one. And I'm going to move it over here across the equal sign by doing the inverse. So this is negative. The opposite of that is positive. So I'm going to end up adding 4x to this negative 4x, which leaves me with 0 right there. Over here, I'm going to come over here and do 4x, and I just moved it. But because I'm crossing the equal sign, I have to do the inverse. So now, what's 3 plus 4? That's going to be 7. They each have an x, so the x comes straight down. And now I'm going to move everything that I didn't touch in my equation. I'm just going to move it straight down. So I'm left with 7x minus 12 equals 2. Remember, my goal is to get this thing with with the variable on one side of the equal sign by itself and all the numbers on the other side. So because of that, I know that I'm going to move this one. And that actually takes me to step number 4. I'm going to add or subtract. So this is subtraction. I'm subtracting this 12. To move it across the equal sign, I have to do the inverse, which makes that 0 right there. And then 2 plus 12 gives me 14. I'm going to bring down everything that I didn't touch. And that takes me to step number 5, where I'm going to multiply or divide. Now this means, because that x is butted up right next to that 7, this means 7 times x. We just don't write the times on it. So because this is multiplication, my opposite, my inverse of multiplication is division. I'm going to divide this by 7 because all that's going to leave me with then is 1x, and that is my goal, right? My goal is to end up with the variable equaling some number. Whatever I do on one side of the equal sign, though, I have to do to the other side. So I'm going to divide that 14 by 7. What's 14 divided by 7? 2. After all of that, I finally end up with x equals 2. Now, if you aren't sure that that's your answer, you can always take this x equals 2 back up here and plug it back into your original equation. Just put a 2 anytime that there's an x. And then solve. So 2 minus 4 is -2. 3 times -2 is -6. Okay. And then that's -4 plus 1, which is -3 times, so this whole thing is -3 times 2 is -6. Look at that. So I end up with -6 on both sides. I know that x equals 2 is my correct answer then. I have solved it correctly. So there's videos in each little section in WAMAP. We've kind of done a lot of things very quickly here to get us started. I think it's okay. My goal with this was just to review some stuff, which then you'll kind of dig deeper into it when you are in WAMAP. Remember, you can email or text me if you have any questions. And also what I want you to do, I know that you've already uploaded one thing for this assignment. You can go ahead and upload more. You're just going to click the resubmit button. And I want you to just sort of snap a picture of what this page looks like, what this page looks like, and you can go ahead and upload that to the week 1 assignment. And that will prove to me that you have watched this video as part of the assignment. Hopefully this was okay to kind of ease into it. It probably won't be this long in the future. And I am going to start coloring my pages. I'm going to add some color to my words here. So good luck. Let me know how it goes. Woohoo! We can do this. You guys are awesome.